Welcome to California Highways Route by Route. This podcast explores everything about numbered highways in California, from Route 8 along the coast to US 395 along the Sierras, from Route 8 in the south to Route 139 in the north.
Brought to you by the California Highways webpage and Gribble Nation.
I'm Daniel Fagan. I do the California Highways webpage at www.cahighways.org.
I'm Tom Fear. I'm one of the 4 admins on GribbleNation.org. Typically, I am the one writing about California in the southwest section of the United States.
This is part 2 of bonus episode 2.13, Fast Track and Tolling. So we're calling it bonus episode 2.14. We are currently in our mid-season break while we write the episodes for season 3, where we will cover Route 3 through Route 7. I've written Route 3. I've written the 3 episodes on Route 4, which Tom is reviewing. And while I'm on vacation, I'm going to be working on the multiple episodes on Route 5. During this break, at a slower pace, we'll bring you some highway episodes on special topics. Today's episode continues our interview with Joe Rouse from Caltrans, talking about tolling, fast-track devices, license plate readers, and all sorts of interesting stuff on HOV Lanes. We're picking up our interview with Joe Rouse, who works with Caltrans but is not speaking on behalf of Caltrans. And we're talking about tolling and fast track and how toll roads work in California. And as we ended the last episode, we were talking about interoperability and how one gets a fast track device. So the next question is, do you need a fast track device to ride a toll road?
The answer is no. Most facilities will allow you to, we use a concept called pay-by-plate, where basically they will take a photo of your license plate, and then they will bill you, or you can go and pay online after you use the facility. So, in the previous episode, we've talked about the Transportation Corridor Agencies, which runs the Orange County toll roads. And they are one of these agencies that allows you to go online and pay your toll after you drive the facility. You just go on their website. You tell them, well, my trip started here, or trip ended here. They'll say this is how much you owe. You pay it with a credit card. The only facilities where you absolutely have to have a fast track account, there's 3 express lanes. So the I-405 express lanes in Orange County, the 91 express lanes, which runs both in Orange County and Riverside County, and the I-15 express lanes in Riverside County. There's no exceptions on these. You have to have a transponder. If you use the facility without a transponder, you will get a citation. If CHP catches you without a transponder in your vehicle, they are legally allowed to pull you over, and they could also cite you as well for not having the transponder in your vehicle.
I'll note
no exceptions there.
I'll note the 405 lanes, just because I drove down to Orange County relatively recently, are very well separated from the main part of the freeway. It's not like the express lane, the HOV lanes on the LA County part of the 405. You really need to make an effort to get into them.
In the Bay Area, you striped. Very apparent that there's a delineation of where you can enter and where you can't.
Yeah, so the striping patterns really, they do vary. The 405 facility, Daniel, which you mentioned, is actually the newest express lane in operation in California. Very nice, beautiful facility that just opened up to traffic late last year. And what happened there was they basically rebuilt that entire freeway. They took the existing HOV lanes on that stretch of 405, which for those of you who are not familiar with it, it runs from roughly about State Route 73 up to I-605. So the northern portion of I-405 in Orange County, about 14 miles long. What they did there was they took the existing HOV lanes, they added a second lane to it, and they converted both lanes into express lanes. They also added an additional general purpose lane in each direction. So they had to rebuild all the bridges across the freeway there. It was a massive, massive project, but looks very nice and beautifully done. And so, yeah, in that case, they did as much as they could to make that about as state-of-the-art as they possibly could. So, yeah, it's really the cream of the crop in terms of the facility. Now, Tom, you mentioned the facilities in the Bay Area, and those are more retrofit type of facilities where they did come in and simply do some restriping and throw in some toll readers at various locations. They did not do a lot of reconstruction on any of those facilities there. Now, if I may, I want to just digress about the striping a little bit. If you've driven the carpool lanes in Northern California, you know that they are striped normally like any old freeway lane. You can get in and out at any point. In Southern California, the system has traditionally been what we call limited access, where they use double solid stripes, and you cannot cross those double solid stripes, but periodically those double solid stripes will turn into broken stripes, and you can get in and out at those points. As the systems have evolved over time, there's been a lot of studies and research done on the performance of the limited access versus the continuous access concept used in Northern California. That research has shown that particularly in the limited access concept, where you have those breaks in the double solid stripe and they change into the broken stripe, those areas there of broken stripe do tend to be spots where there have been collisions and there's been a lot of traffic congestion. And so California, Caltrans, we revised our design standards a little bit for those access openings. We figured they need to be longer, and we need to provide a little bit more spacing between upstream and downstream interchanges for those locations. Some of our Caltrans districts decided to take it a step further and do away with the limited access altogether. And so that is why you now see, and I know we're supposed to be talking about Fastrak and tolling, so I hope you guys will bear with me here as we kind of digress a little bit into HOV operations, but that is why you see in some parts of Southern California now, particularly Orange County and the Empire, they've done away with that limited access on most of those HOV lanes, and it's now designed where you can get in and out at any point. The lone holdout has been Caltrans District 7 in Los Angeles. They felt that there was still some benefit to keeping the limited access, and so they've decided to retain that. So it does create kind of a unique situation where you drive across the county line, and one side of the county line, it's limited access. The other side of the county line, it's continuous access, and that does confuse and throw off the public.
As I recall, two things on that. When you get to the northern part of Route 14 in LA County, I think it either goes off for certain hours or becomes non-limited access in the HOV lanes. And the other thing that I remember, because when they first put the 405 lanes in, they had those limited access points at some very bad spots in the San Fernando Valley, which we suffered with driving a van pool, that they will only do those limited access spots between an off-ramp and an on-ramp, I think it is, or the order is vice, so that you don't get the churn of people suddenly trying to cut across all the lanes. So you'll see a lane go off, and that's when the limited access will start, and it will end just before all the traffic comes in from the folks who just got on the freeway.
Yes, that's precisely what we do. That is precisely what we do to avoid the situation that you described. Now, State Route 14 is a little bit interesting because as you indicated, it does operate on a part-time basis, and so it's not a 24/7 facility like much of the LA, much of the other HOV lanes in Southern California. And so they've also experimented with having it continue to be limited access, even though it only operates part-time, or converting it to continuous access. And I think they're going to go back in and they're going to turn it back into limited access again, either in some spots or in all of it. I'm not entirely sure what their plan is. It's been a while since I've had a conversation with District 7 about their plans over there. But, let me talk just real quick about how this has affected the development of the express lanes, particularly in Northern California. So, Northern California, we've traditionally had, in the Bay Area, where most of these express lanes are located now, we've had, the continuous access HOV lanes, right? Motor Republic's been used to it. They also knew that during the off-peak periods, they could drive in it. It was a normal traffic lane. So initially, when they were proposing the express lane network in the Bay Area, they wanted to turn all of those continuous access lanes into limited access like Southern California. And the first couple of projects that were built in the Bay Area, I-680, over the Sunol grade between State Route 84 and State Route 237, and then the State Route 237 express lanes themselves across the northern end of San Jose, they incorporated limited access into those facilities. They only had certain spots where you could get in and get out. That did not go over well with the public. They had a lot of problems with people violating. They had a lot of complaints about people who formerly were able to get in and out wherever they could. Now they could not, and it just did not sit well with them. So we, meaning Caltrans, and the regional agencies that were developing these facilities, we kind of took a step back, and we came up with a new process where every time one of these HOV lanes is proposed for conversion to an express lane, we will do an operational and safety analysis of the entire facility. And we will look at where there have been concentrations of collisions and where there tends to be heavy congestion. And so what has happened is that as these express lanes have started to come online in the Bay Area, you are seeing a mix of limited access, and you're seeing, in some cases, no access restrictions at all. People are allowed to get in and out at any point. Well, then you might ask yourself, okay, well, how do you avoid cheating in those situations? Well, if you think about it, during the peak periods where these facilities are going to be operating, during the time these facilities are going to be operating and going to be most popular with people, your general purpose lanes are going to be congested, right? So somebody's going to get into that express lane. They're not going to want to get out into congested traffic to bypass a toll. So the cheating that was feared by allowing this continuous access really has not manifested itself in the way that I guess some people might have thought it would occur. I'm not aware of any issues, that these agencies are having, with people cheating on these facilities. They seem to be operating just fine. Now, in Southern California, they do not want to take that approach. They do tend to impose the access restrictions when they convert the HOV lanes to hot lanes. And there's a big reason for that. In the Bay Area, these express lanes were built with funding that was readily available and existing and already in place. In Southern California, the express lanes have normally been funded through bonds, which is why the tolling becomes much more important, and so they want to protect that toll revenue. And so allowing people to basically get in and out wherever they can, defeats, the purpose of wanting people to collect the toll so that they can pay off the revenue. And so the bondholders, the financiers, they don't want a situation where people have the potential to cheat. So that is why on the 405, as you mentioned earlier, Daniel, you've got the nice striping in there. You've got the channelizers in there that are separating the general purpose lanes from the express lanes. It's to protect that revenue stream and to keep people from cheating. It also those barriers also provide some psychological benefits to folks. They don't get impacted so much by slowing traffic in the general purpose lanes. They feel more comfortable and can continue to drive at a good rate of speed. And so it helps with the performance of the facilities that way. That is one drawback that we have seen with the continuous access express lanes, is that they do have a tendency to get more bogged down when the general purpose lanes next to them are congested. So they have their pros and their cons.
Now, is there any connection, and since we're talking briefly digressing on HOV lanes, to something I've always heard as apocrypha, which is when they did the original diamond lanes, and they no longer call HOV lanes diamond lanes, back in the 70s, they took an existing lane from traffic and converted it to a diamond lane. This was done on Interstate 10 on the Santa Monica Freeway and on just for a portion of the 405. And I remember when they did that, and that really pissed off people because it made the other lanes slow. And I heard apocryphally that there was a decision made in Caltrans that they would never take an existing traffic lane and make it HOV restricted access. They would always add a lane if they were going to do an HOV lane. So now if you have these continuous lanes that were either not 24 hours or people could go in and out, that was in effect a general access lane. And if you're converting it to toll, they'd want something to distinguish it more. That makes sense?
Yes, I know what you're talking about. So yes, in the case of the Bay Area, you did have, you would operate, in the morning from say 5 in the morning to 10 in the morning, and then in the evening you would run from 3 in the afternoon to like 7 o'clock in the evening. When they converted to the express lanes, they changed the hours of operation so that they run from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. And so they take away that midday block where it performed as a general purpose lane. And there have been a few issues with that here and there on some corridors. We've mostly seen it on Interstate 880, which already has a lot of heavy truck traffic on there because it's a main route in and out of the Port of Oakland. And so what's happened there is, the reduced capacity on the general purpose lanes combined with the heavy truck traffic has, created a few issues here and there. And so that's a little bit of a concern, but it's not raised to the point where they want to revisit that. Now, in general, yes, Caltrans, since that experience with the Santa Monica Freeway in 1976, we have generally avoided converting general purpose lanes to managed lanes. And it's happened on a case-by-case basis. I know we did it on I-5 in Stockton a few years ago. It made financial sense and engineering sense to be able to do that. And it was a very short segment that was converted, and it already had a pretty good level of HOV2s using that corridor anyway. So it was deemed that there wasn't going to be much of an impact there. But, there were some people that seemed to think, Caltrans has prohibited that type of conversion. No, that's not the case. In fact, I will tell you that we are on the verge of issuing a policy that will now explicitly state that we support general purpose lane conversions where they make sense. Doesn't mean we're going to do it everywhere, but it does mean that it's an alternative that we want to look at. And the reason for that is because of the department, the California has really moved away from using, is really trying to find ways to drive down the amount of traffic on the highways and try to, discourage freeway widening, right? The idea of this theory of induced demand, you build it, they will come. If you add lanes to the freeways, eventually they're going to fill up and you're going to have to go back and widen again, and that's not good for air quality. That's not good for helping the state achieve its climate goals. So we are now starting to look at the idea of converting general purpose lanes to HOV lanes or even express lanes in some locations. There's nothing actively being proposed on that front. It is being studied. I think there was actually, I take that back. There was one proposal in San Diego where they would have looked at it. But it's definitely something that is on the minds of a lot of people, as this theory of induced demand really seems to catch wildfire and, encourage people to look at alternatives to widening freeways, but still trying to get the most out of them, because that's what the HOV concept was originally intended to do, right? Encourage more people, help the freeways to push more people through. And so, with that thought in mind, there's this idea of, why can't we look at, completing the HOV system, by doing some of these conversions, encouraging people to get out of their cars, make that modal shift that way. So it's a big step for Caltrans to actually come out and officially make this statement in its policy. And it will be interesting to see how, what the department does really in this area going forward.
Okay. I'll note I've been asking a lot of the questions, and you're probably saying, getting it a lot more edgewise. Trust me, when we get to our next bonus episode, Tom's going to be doing a lot of that episode because it's on an area that he's really into. Have you had anything you wanted to add here, Tom?
I've got some stuff for the end. I've been kind of thinking of you guys were talking about kind of the difference between where you can buy Fastrak. So I'm going to hit on something at the end with that.
Okay. So what advantage, coming back to Fastraks, does getting a Fastrak device get me?
Well, I think the first and most prominent one is lower toll rate. So, we were talking a while ago about, the idea of pay-by-plate and the additional costs associated with that transaction, the additional fees that you pay that way. With Fastrak, you don't need to do that. As you pass under if you have the transponder properly mounted on your vehicle, as you pass under the reader, it's going to scan it. It's going to take care of that transaction immediately. So it's very simple, very clean. So and so there's no additional processing costs or anything associated with that. It's all handled just by a simple back and forth communication between the tag and the reader, and that information is transmitted back into the back office for the toll operation. The other benefit to having a Fastrak device is on these express lanes. more and more of these express lanes as they come online are requiring everybody to have a transponder to use it. So what does this mean for the HOVs? Well, we talked a little bit earlier about the creation of the Fastrak Flex branding, and how there was some confusion there with LA Metro and what they were trying to do, and the traditional Fastrak versus the one with the switch. Well, on these other facilities, as they want to offer the HOVs either toll-free travel or discounted travel, depending on the facility. Some will do both. You need that Fastrak Flex to be able to take advantage of that. So if you want to travel in a carpool or in these express lanes, you want to have at least the Flex tag, so that you can get your discount. So those are the two advantages right there.
Okay. I have to ask this because I work in cybersecurity. I presume the transmissions between the Fastrak device and the whatever you call them up on the gantries are encrypted, and there's appropriate protection within the device, protection for spoofing and stuff like that. Do you know any of that technical stuff?
I'm not real familiar with that technical stuff, but I do know that it's fairly straightforward. It's your traditional RFID transaction.
Oh, so it's really down at the level of RFID.
Yep.
The reason I'm asking that is I had heard just recently that LAMTA is talking about a new version of the TAP system that they use on the buses and the Metrolink trains. I always get Metrolink and Metro Rail confused. And they're going to adapt it so that it will work with Metro Rail. And I was wondering, would there ever be a benefit of unifying things like the Clipper card and the TAP card with the whole toll system?
That's your comment on that, Daniel, is very timely. LA Metro is actually getting ready to put together a project known as a mobility wallet, where you will basically have one device that can be used to pay your transit fare as well as your toll transactions. The details of how that would work are still to be worked out, but they are just launching this. They were able to get a federal grant to help pay for getting the project off the ground. We had our kickoff meeting on that earlier this week, and so they're going to be tinkering with that type of a concept to see how that would work.
I think the only response to that is cool, because that really sounds cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be, I think there are a lot of people who support the idea of trying to consolidate everything, into one type of system. If you can make it work, and if you can still meet the state interoperability mandate at the same time, I think that would be well received by the public, so that they don't have to carry a bunch of different cards or devices on them, to handle all these different transactions. So California in general is working towards a more seamless means of paying transit fares in general. So there's this project called the California Integrated Transit Project, CAL-ITP, which is really going to make it so that you won't, in the future, you could use one fare payment system to cover any ride on any transit service in California. And so this effort, the mobility wallet, is kind of a little bit of an offshoot of that, I guess you could say, where now they're trying to integrate it with other types of services such as tolling. So it's very exciting times coming ahead in this area.
I think whatever you can do to make things frictionless and improve security at the same time will be a good thing. One of the problems I've noticed with certificates is very often there's friction involved in installing them. This sounds like a good frictionless approach to encourage people to use transit in California wherever they are.
Yep, very much so.
So it sounds like a great idea. We've covered some of the stuff that I had already in questions in our various discussions here. Where can people go to learn more about Fastrak?
So I am happy to announce that just within the last several days, a new and improved website has been launched. It's been around for a while, but it just got a significant makeover, which I think makes it a lot better than what it had earlier been. It is known as fastrak.org, and that site will provide anybody with information about electronic toll collection in California, where the facilities are, who operates them, information about, you can provide links to every one of the agencies that operate these facilities, the 6 agencies that manage, that includes the 6 agencies that manage the different accounts. You can sign up for accounts that way. It's basically a one-stop shop for all information related to electronic toll collection in California. So that updated site just went live. It's a beautiful-looking site. I was looking at it this morning, and so I think it's going to be a great tool for the traveling public, for anybody who's not familiar with it. So again, that website is Fastrak, Fastrak.org.
And we'll put a link to it, of course, in the show notes there. Now, what else should we know about transponders? If you have an old transponder, if you have a new transponder, I know we've already talked about interoperability, but what else is useful to know?
So let me just add a couple of things that I know I hear people say sometimes that I want to just correct maybe some misconceptions. First of all, we've talked a lot about Fastrak. I want to make it clear that Fastrak is not a corporation. It's not a company. It's a brand. It's the brand that is used for electronic toll collection on state highways in California. The Fastrak brand is actually owned by the Transportation Corridor Agencies, those joint powers authorities that run the toll roads in Orange County. And so all the other toll operators across California, they have a license from TCA to use the Fastrak brand. So it helps with that uniformity. It helps promote the interoperability and things like that. So just want to make it clear that Fastrak is just a brand name. And you will, if you do a search for Fastrak, I'm hopeful that in the future, when people do a Google search for Fastrak, the fastrak.org site will pop up. But you may also see websites such as Bay Area Fastrak. So that's for MTC BATA. You may see the toll roads, which is TCA, operators of the toll roads in Orange County. And so, yes, the Fastrak, they each use the Fastrak brand to promote their individual electronic toll collection program.
And as we've noted, when we say the toll roads in Orange County, we don't mean all toll roads in Orange County. The 91 is separate. We mean what were the transportation corridor roads. This is the 73, the 231, the 261. There was once a 241, and the 133. The portions of those that are tolled.
That's correct. Yes, that's that agency. 91 is handled through OCTA, and they have their own separate website. I believe it's 91expresslanes.com.
Yeah, they used to have their own Twitter account too. I don't think it's spoken in a while.
I don't know. I know the toll roads are still pretty active on social media. I don't know about many of the others. There is that. So I want to make sure that folks understand that when you talk about Fastrak, it's not a private corporation. And the toll facilities in California are not privately owned either. I think we touched on that quite a bit in the previous episode, but these are all operated by public agencies. There's no private operators in California. Now, we did talk in the previous episode about a public-private partnership law that was passed in 1989 that resulted in the 91 express lanes getting built and the 125 toll road, the SBX, South Bay Expressway. But both of those, in those cases, the private parties that had the franchise to develop and operate those facilities, they eventually turned that over to public operators. So there's all facilities in California, all toll facilities in California are publicly operated now. Now, these agencies, they will contract with private firms to help with account management and things like that. So let's say you get a violation. You may notice there's some type of a private company that's mentioned on the billing information or the contact information. Particularly if it goes to collections, they will contract with private parties to help manage that, and to help with some of the day-to-day operations. If you go to a customer service center, you may not necessarily be talking to an employee of that public agency that operates that toll facility. You may be talking to a vendor that is operating that on behalf of that public agency. So there are private parties that are involved in the operation of toll facilities in California, but the toll facilities themselves are not operated by private parties. So I just want to make sure that folks understand that. Those are two very common misconceptions regarding tolling in California. So I just want to make sure we clear those up. Another thing that I wanted to point out, and I think we touched on this a little bit, is that the type of transponder or toll tag, I've used the term interchangeably, I know, throughout this conversation tonight, the type of transponder that's being used for Fastrak is changing in California. So when the Fastrak systems were first created in the 1990s, they used, as I mentioned, these big boxy devices that could be mounted on the windshield. A few years ago, we adopted a new technology that's actually cheaper and is used by other states. We were thinking about the national interoperability, down the road, but mostly it's because they were cheaper, and it's because the technology that was being used in California at the time was only being used in California, and there was only one company that was manufacturing those transponders. And so if you look at the state law related to interoperability, it says that the technology that's to be used in California needs to be an open standard that can be developed by, and that there have to be multiple vendors available to procure these transponders from. So with that not happening anymore, costs were going up, and so the agencies needed to look at an alternative solution. So they adopted a new technology that's actually used in the logistics industry, moving the freight and things like that. So using the barcodes and things like that and the scanners, that type of technology was adopted for tolling. And so California adopted that standard that is used by the freight and goods movement industry. And it's ISO 18000-6C. Daniel, I don't know how familiar you are with the ISO standards, but that's the name of it if you ever want to go look it up.
I work with 27001 and I forget the number of the common criteria, but I work with ISO standards.
Yeah. So it's a different type of RFID than what has traditionally been used for electronic toll collection in California. So what does this mean? So if you have the older style of Fastrak transponder that beeps when you go through a toll plaza, come 2027, that technology is no longer going to be used. That is the phase-out date. And so in the next few years, the toll agencies are going to be reaching out to their customers who have those older transponders and encouraging them to swap them out for the newer technology. So it could be either the sticker tags that we were talking about earlier that mount directly onto the windshield. There are still transponders that can be mounted on the windshield. For instance, the switchable transponders, the Fastrak Flex, you can't do that with a sticker tag. It still has to be a hard case tag that has to be mounted on the windshield using the Velcro strips. So there will still be some of those plastic cases, but it's smaller. They're smaller now. They don't have the battery in them, which is part of what was making the older technology so expensive. So they will not beep. So if you have one of these newer tags and you drive in the toll reader and you're used to hearing the beep, you're not going to hear it anymore because they don't have that capability. But the real driving factor here was to drive down the cost for the operators, and they're going to pass those savings along to the consumers and the motorists by reinvesting those savings, into improving the transportation system. So it's a good thing. So again, if you have one of those older style transponders, just be on the lookout for that and be prepared to swap it out when it's done.
My transponder is actually one of those flex ones. I got it from Bay Area Fastrak. I found it's actually easier to mount. I have the Velcro in my primary car, but my two secondary cars, I found it's actually easier to mount with Scotch tape. It's kind of a weird hack to it. So I thought that was kind of funny. And what I was looking it up when we were talking, you guys were talking about it. Bay Area Fastrak is the thing that shows up first on Yahoo and Google. Fastrak.org is third on Yahoo and currently 8th on the search on Google.
That's probably because they're not paying Google. Google has sort of changed its algorithms, not necessarily for the better. Now, we're coming down the home stretch in terms of questions, and one thing that I want to talk to Joe about was what I like to call fake license plates. And if you look out there, you will see people who either get the paper plates from a dealer and just keep using them forever and ever and never and not putting on the real plates, or you get people who are so, I'm going to be a little bit pejorative here, vain on the colors of their cars, and they get license plate wraps that change the colors of the plates. You can go and buy a vinyl wrap that will change your blue on white to being red on black, or I've even seen dark green on black, which is horrible for contrast in plate readers. You see people who put shaded covers over the plates so that the plate readers can't read them. You see people who either don't want to mar their fenders or don't want license plate readers that look at the front of a car to read their plates. To what extent are these legal? What is legal here? And what is the impact of all of this on the toll roads?
So I'm going to say, in the interest of full disclosure, I work for Caltrans. I don't work for the Department of Motor Vehicles or for CHP, which would really be responsible for issuing those plates and also enforcing and making sure that the right plates are mounted on the right type of vehicle. But here's what I can tell you that I do know. So the DMV website lists all of the different types of plates that are issued in California that are legal for use in California. The basic plate is the one that is white with blue numbers and the word California in red letters. You will still see the older style blue plates with gold letters or yellow letters. And then the black plates with yellow letters are still around. In fact, DMV is now issuing those as specialty plates again.
I think they're also issuing, if you've got an old enough vehicle, you can get the yellow with black letters, the blue with yellow. And although they haven't made it yet, I think the plates that still have the California and the sunburst, like you used to see on LA Law when they would close the trunk, I think there are still some of those out there.
Yeah, you can put those in any car. You just got to pay an extra fee on your registration. Yeah,
there are a lot of different specialty type plates out there. And then, some of those, like what you just described, Daniel, those are still around and, are good till the end of their useful life, I guess. So, the DMV website does have a very comprehensive list of all of the different types of plates that can be issued out there. Now, to your question about, what's legal and what's not, I do know that these license plate covers that people seem to use, I've seen some of them that you're talking about that make the plate look like it's white letters on a black background. I'm not entirely sure if those are legal or not. I can tell you that the vehicle code says that a license plate cover can only be limited to the area of the registration tabs. You can't cover the numbers or anything like that. It can only cover that top part of the plate. So that's the best that I can tell you about that. But do you know whether
any of the license plate readers out there have trouble with the odd colors on the plates?
I think that's probably less of an issue now. The camera technology has drastically improved over the years. And it used to be that there were a lot of people who would complain about, you guys sent me a notice of toll evasion, and you said this was my license plate, and, your photo is wrong, and it's because the technology that was used, the optical scanning technology, was not like it is nowadays. The optical scanning technology has improved so much that I think it's far less, there's far less potential for errors like that to occur.
So someone that did a plate that was a mix of K's and X's, as I've seen, or zeros and O's, would still be okay. You'd be able to figure it out.
Yeah, the system's not perfect, and that's why a lot of times these images undergo a manual review, which, again, is part of the reason why if you do a pay-by-plate tolling, there's additional costs associated with that because you have to pay for the cost of doing all that additional work. So, the system, it's not 100% foolproof. There will be errors. And I'm sure that there are probably some issues. I can't say with any certainty that these different types of license plate covers are creating issues, but I would think that with the improvements in the optical scanning technology, it's probably not as much of an issue as it is now. I don't think, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, I don't think the toll agencies are as necessarily concerned about whether or not a person has a legal plate on it, on their vehicle, so long as that plate is associated with an account and the agency gets their money. That's going to be their main concern. I will tell you that DMV recently approached Caltrans to have a conversation with the toll agencies about seeing how the toll agencies could support DMV in ensuring that motorists are keeping their vehicles properly registered. The toll agencies are kind of cool on that concept. They were okay with looking at the idea, but they really did not want to get into the business of trying to tell people, you need to make sure that your registration is up.
So the toll agency would not, for example, send you a warning of, oh, you drove through with an expired temporary registration, you need to put on your real plates, or you drove through with wrap on your plates and you need to put on your regular plates. They wouldn't do that.
Exactly. I don't think that they want to get involved in the business of that where they can. I think they prefer to leave that type of enforcement and messaging to the CHP and to the DMV. So, but they did get involved in one aspect of some of this stuff, and that's the temporary paper plates that you alluded to earlier. So, it used to be a few years ago when you buy a new car in California, you would have you'd have just the simple, dealer logo or whatever. You wouldn't actually have a license plate for several weeks until DMV would ship it to you. And so what would happen was there were a number of people who would go drive on a toll facility and they wouldn't pay. And because they didn't have a plate, the toll agencies couldn't collect anything. So the toll agencies pushed for legislation to have some type of a temporary plate system created. And they were successful in being able to get DMV to do that. And so that's why you now, whenever you purchase a new car, you're going to get a set of paper plates with a number the minute you drive out of there. That's directly from the toll agencies lobbying to make that happen.
And you are supposed to, when you receive your new plates, put those on your car, not leave on the temporary plates. I still see people driving with temporary plates that expired in 2023 out there.
Yeah, and that's an enforcement issue.
Yep. And since we're talking about enforcement issues, I have this as a question, but I'm sort of going to ask it and answer it myself, which is, if you are in a state, your car comes from a state where they issue you two plates, you have to have a front plate in California.
Yes.
Okay.
You need both a front and a back plate.
I did discover just today, while looking up for an example of these wraps, to show Joe that there is one company authorized to make a stick-on vinyl front plate, and you can only use it on the front plate for vehicles. And this is used very often for things like Teslas, where there are so many electronics in the front bumper that you don't want to drill into the front bumper. And so it's a stick-on plate, but only one company can issue them, and they're like $144. You can't just go and buy a wrap from anyone and use them legally. That doesn't mean people probably don't do that, but only one company. I think the name of it is, let me get it right here, License Plate Wrap is the only company authorized to sell wraps at this time, according to the DMV, and a vinyl plate costs $131.60. This was as of a couple of years ago, on top of your standard license plate fees.
Interesting. Yeah, I think with the move towards more, connected and autonomous vehicles and, the different types of technology that are used to support that, it's going to create situations where, the status quo, the way that we've been doing things for, 70, 100 years, has to be changed and revisited. And I know that California state government, they have put together a number of working groups to look at different issues associated, with this new type of vehicle technology. And I would imagine that situations such as, what we've described here tonight with the plates and the conflicts with the equipment in the front of the vehicle. We talked earlier about windshields and the challenges that people are experiencing with being able to put transponders in the vehicles because of the windshields and not having them read. I think there's a lot of things that are going to have to be looked at, which we're going to have to be open to new ideas and new approaches.
And I should note
that interesting times ahead.
I should note that California has also authorized what are called digital plates, which is a digital, basically liquid paper plate that you can put. I know they issue one for the rear of the car. I have no idea what they do for digital plates on the front of the car. I haven't looked. They may issue a traditional one for the front, but they're like an extra $200. You can change the logo where the normal DMV logo is. And the important factor on those is they digitally update your registration sticker for you. If you ever see something that looks like a digital plate with a colored registration sticker on it, you've either got someone using a fake plate or someone who is stupid and put a sticker on their actual digital plate.
I'll have to keep an eye out for that. That's
yeah, you'll have to give a...
Yeah, I was a late idea and moved around because the toll operators, the state toll operators, so going back to the whole conversation here about tolling, so there is, and you'll see this if you go to the fasttrack.org website, you will see an organization mentioned known as the California Toll Operators Committee, CTOC. That is an ad hoc organization that's comprised of these 11 or 12 different agencies that have the authority to operate toll facilities in California. Caltrans is an ex officio member of CTOC, and they regularly talk about these types of things, such as digital license plates. When legislation was passed, considering digital license plates, well, what is this going to mean for our business? And the toll agencies will go in and they will lobby the legislature. I mentioned the temporary plate, implementation. That was CTOC, collectively working together to try to make that happen because it was an issue that was common to all of them. And so they are actively engaged in looking at these different bits of legislation that come through. How is it going to affect our business? How can we make this work for us? And so there's a lot of activity going on that way. They are very involved and aware of a lot of what's happening on this front. They've got some very good people who are keeping track of a lot of different bits of legislation and, bringing it to everybody's attention in terms of what's happening and, getting people to start talking about it. And they've actually built some strong relationships with some members of the legislature, who were introducing legislation. So case in point, there was a bill that was introduced a year or two ago that would have changed how the fees for missing a toll evasion fees, how those would have been calculated and trying to adjust those so that it was a little less burdensome on people of lower income. And the toll agencies worked very closely with the author of that bill to try to make sure that their needs were addressed. And it was a good, solid partnership. And so the fact that they've built these connections in the legislature, I think, can't but help, the agencies to make sure that when these changes are coming, that their business is not impacted in a negative way. But the good news is the agencies are also very willing to help where they can, but they also know that, hey, there's certain things that are just not going to fly for us. And so a lot of what they do is trying to educate legislators on how tolling works and how some of these bits of legislation, which do have good intent, can be very negative for what the toll agencies do. So it's very interesting to watch that.
Maybe we'll convince the legislators to listen to this episode or this pair of episodes, and they can learn about tolling. Let me ask one more question, and then I'm going to see what thoughts Tom has before we wrap this up. My last question is, there is a large segment that are upset about express lanes and the HOV lanes, the folks who call them Lexus lanes, that they sort of have a class problem in that only the people that can afford to pay for the lanes or afford to pay for the transponders can use them, and it actually hurts people of lower incomes, both in terms of using more gas, losing more time, and it's sort of an unfair thing, and that these lanes should be open to all. What would you say to folks who make that argument?
So equity issues like that are a huge concern. You are absolutely correct. And so there's a few things that some of the agencies are doing in this area, and they have been for a while. So in the case of down in Southern California, when they put in the 2 express lanes on I-10 and I-110, the 2 facilities that are operated by LA Metro, the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, one of the things that they did there was they created a program for individuals who were below a certain income threshold. They created a program that allowed them to be able to obtain a Fastrak account at a little lower rate. They did not have to put down as much money on the account. In fact, I think, if I recall correctly, LA Metro even paid for them to have their Fastrak account set up for them. They put the money down in the account for them. They also created a program where if you use transit after so many transit trips, you would get toll credits. And so you could use those on those express lanes. It was unique and limited to that facility. Fast forward to one of the newer facilities that's gone live, and that's the Route 101 express lanes in San Mateo County. When they built that project, when they were working to develop that project, they did a substantial amount of community outreach. And they said, how can these lanes be put to serve you best? What can we do to ensure that you're able to use these facilities, that you benefit from them? And so a couple of ideas were kicked around, and one of them was, again, discounted Fastrak, for people below a certain income threshold, or a discounted transit pass, the Clipper card. And they wound up going with both options as part of their program down there. And I'd heard some time back when there were some statistics given on that program that the transit pass was actually far more preferred by people, as an alternative for them to use. Not many people were taking advantage of the discounted Fastrak account, but they were taking advantage of the discounted transit pass, the prepaid transit pass. So there's been a lot of thoughtful work that's been going into this, and I think it's going to continue. Our policy, I think I don't know if I mentioned it here in this broadcast or the previous broadcast, where we talk about, we have a statewide managed lanes policy that we are on the verge of issuing a new update, an update on that, And one of the things that we are now going to be requiring is that whenever tolling is being considered as a strategy on a managed lane, that there has to be some type of an equity study done. You have to look at the community that's using the facility and, figure out how, folks that, have historically been disadvantaged, how can this facility be made to serve them in an effective way? And so I think the end result, and again, I'm just speaking for myself here, again, not representing my organization, but I believe that the approach that you're going to see going forward, let me take a step back. So in the case of LA Metro, when they put those express lanes in, basically what they did is they went to the community and they said, this is what we're going to do for you. We're coming in, we're putting in these lanes. These are the programs we're going to be putting in for you, who, have some challenges here, and make sure that you have an opportunity to be able to access these lanes as well. This is what we're going to do for you. Look at the San Mateo model, and instead what they did is they went to the community and they said, what do you want from us? What would you like to see? And I think it's that type of engagement that you are going to see going forward. More of the solicitation from the communities as these projects are getting developed. What would you like to see? How can we develop a system that benefits you? Another program that is also just getting underway, and the Bay Area is, again, kind of launching this one, and it's BATA that's actually managing this, the Bay Area Toll Authority, is they are creating a program for people of lower income who can get a discounted toll rate for using an express lane facility. So they're only going to pilot it on, I think, only one or two facilities, if I recall correctly. And what will happen is folks can register specifically with BATA, and then whenever they use the express lane facility, they will get a discount off of the posted toll. I can't remember what the amount is going to be, but they will be offering that on a pilot basis, and they're going to be measuring that to see how that works. So, I think the lessons that we have seen over the last few years about, the need for really paying attention to, the folks in our communities who have, been disadvantaged over the years, I think those messages are being heard, and there's a lot of work that's happening on that front. I do still think that there's going to be a lot of concerns about, creating facilities that are more geared towards people, of higher incomes. But if you also look at the statistics, and Washington State did some studies on this for their express lanes, and there's been other studies that have been done here in California. The 91 express lanes were extensively studied by a researcher at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo some years ago. What these studies have shown is that people of all income levels do use these facilities. Now, yes, folks of a higher income level do tend to use them more, but the folks at the lower income levels use them as well. And they typically use them because they need to use them, because what they do is they look at the value of their time. Let's say that they are running late to pick up their kid from the babysitter, and they're going to have to pay a fine for every few minutes that they're late in picking up their kid. They're going to look at the toll rate on that fine. They're going to compare that to the potential late fee that they would have to pay to the babysitter. If the toll that they're going to pay is less than what they would pay at the babysitter, they're going to use the toll rate, right? That seems to be what seems to be happening here. So people do use them. They do use them at different rates. They do use them for different purposes. I think another thing that you're going to be seeing a bit more study on, and again, Washington State has really kind of been the leader on this. They worked with the University of Washington to really do a solid assessment of what are the benefits that people are getting from these lanes, and they look at the communities surrounding these facilities. They look at who's using them. They look at the transit service, the transit usage rates in these communities. They look at how the revenues are being spent and what they're being spent on, with the idea of looking at, well, are we really investing the resources in the right spot? Are folks really getting the benefits out of this that we hope that they would do? And so Caltrans is currently working with the University of Washington to conduct a similar type of study on several express lanes here in California. And so we're hoping to get that study launched here in the next few weeks. And it'll be interesting to see, what the results are compared to, what they saw for the folks in the Seattle area when they looked at that I-405 express lanes in Seattle, looked at the numbers there and what was happening there and the benefits and the, and the impacts on the communities there. So equity is a very, very important thing. I know if you are, Governor Newsom, has typically used the phrase California for all. And so that message of making sure that we take care of everybody is a message that has been well heard within Caltrans, and our leadership, particularly our director, very, very adamant that making sure that we do just exactly that, and that we make sure that we are looking at all impacted communities and that we're giving everybody a chance to benefit from the improvements that we are making to our transportation system. So I know that's a long answer, but it is something that is very high priority for us as a state.
2 notes, and then I'm going to see what Tom has to add on this as we wrap up. The 2 notes I'll make is if you look at what they're doing with the YOLO 80 lanes, you'll see they're doing a lot of efforts there in terms of equity and improving transit. That's all noted on my webpage. The other note I'll make is a thought that came to me listening to this is one advantage the HOT lanes have over the HOV lanes that don't have a toll is even with the Fastrak, you at least now have automated enforcement of people who are using the lanes, so you don't have the people cheating in the lanes as much because they know they're going to get a bill. And that will be a deterrent and may actually reduce congestion in those lanes.
Very true.
Okay. With that, Tom, I've sort of been monopolizing the questions on this one. Do you have some additional thoughts or questions?
Regarding front plates, I actually have some experience with installing those as an out-of-state resident or someone moving to California. In 2016, late 2015, I had to buy front license plate holders because I was moving from Florida to California. Typically, I found that the easiest place to find those is at dealer parts departments. They're usually pretty easy to install, and they come with a kit that usually, like anybody can install with a drill. A lot of people that have like collector's cars or high-end cars don't tend to like them, so they try to find like a mount or a bracket that will kind of like slide into the grill. Me personally, I kind of tend to find that rubs usually against like front spoilers and chips away at paint, so that's not kind of a preference for me. But if you're ever wondering how you do it, that's typically how it's done. I want to say they cost around $30 a piece on my 2 cars that I brought over here. And I forgot earlier, one of the things I was going to reference with the Fastrak that I bought was actually through Bay Area Fastrak, which does not have a monthly maintenance fee.
Are there any other questions you have for Joe?
No, I think we've covered it quite extensively. This is a lot of really good information.
Yeah, I really want to thank Joe for this, and we will now conclude up the episode. Next time on California Highways Route by Route, we've just finished this 2-part interview. We're still in our interseason break, and we're going to be doing a special episode on auto trails, and Tom has done a lot of the research for this, and it's one of the subjects that he really finds interesting, and I've read through what he's written, and it looks like it's going to be really fun. I know I learned a lot reading it, so I'm looking forward to that one. Once we're done with all of that, we will pick up with Season 3, where we will be covering Route 3 through Route 7. For more information, we will have some links to the various Fast Track organizations on the show page at CA Route by Route. As always, information is available on our website, CA Route by Route, where you can leave us comments on the episode. The episode is also available on our Anchor FM home, Anchor FM, CA Route by Route. Join us as we continue to explore California highways route by route. I'll note that this episode was written by Daniel Fagan and Tom Fear. I edited it and produced it. Our opening theme is I Like to Be by the Seaside by John H. Glover Kind. Episodes are recorded by freeconferencecall.com, and this podcast is a product of California Highways at cahighways.org and Gribble Nation at gribblnation.org. And since I think we've exhausted anything, we're not going to do our usual post-podcast talk, because I think we've got 2 hours in all of this already. Thank you very much, Joe, for being on the podcast.
We definitely appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you, guys. It was really a pleasure to be able to do this. I'm sorry it took us so long to make it happen, but I'm glad we were able to make it happen. So
I know I learned a lot on this episode.
Yeah, I definitely did. That's like, I'm just sitting there listening, and then it's like, wow, this is like a lot of really good information. Definitely appreciate your time.
We'll talk to folks.
I've been doing this for 16 years, so I've seen a lot over the last few years.
Well, thank you again, and we will hear from folks next time on California Highways Route by Route. Thank you all.